Good morning, teachers, professors, fellow FINEX members, and guest speakers. This second webinar was presented to you by the FINEX Foundation to the Business Education Committee entitled Teaching Business Under the New Norm. We have about more than 500 registered participants, double than that, who attended the first webinar. We configured today's webinar to be a prequel from the first, entitled Understanding How Businesses Are Coping with the COVID-19 Impact. For those of you who were not able to catch that first webinar, I suggest that you can still watch the first webinar and possibly subscribe through FINEX Philippines YouTube channel, #educators. The feedback I got from business professors, considering I am from the province, is that the seminar was daunting. Of course, our three speakers and moderator are former FINEX presidents, and Madam Maribic is the CEO of Grant Thornton Philippines, while the two other speakers were two former CFOING awardees, namely Mr. Jeng Pascual of Shell Philippines and Jimmy Ismael of Ortigas Land. Ma'am Maribic presented a panorama of the current landscape and a complete checklist on how to appropriately respond based on each respective company circumstances. It is a blueprint of how to go about the current pandemic. We can say a panogram of the current situation. My main takeaway from her presentation is how to turn risks into opportunities. Then the next two speakers presented the respective situations, strategies to overcome current uncertainties. Mr. Jeng Pascual described a perfect storm, which with oversupply of oil and destruction of demand. Their core solution was embodied in their three C's, namely care, continuity, and cash governance, with an end goal of thriving under the new normal. Mr. Jimmy Ismael provided the four forces that are shaping the next normal, namely metamorphosis of demand, altered workforce, regulatory uncertainty, and understanding the virus. He proceeded describing what leaders need to think and act across five horizons, namely resolve, resilience, return, reimagination, and reform, that brought forth their comprehensive strategy of Rise Beyond 2020 that involved three P's: preserve value, protect stakeholders, prepare for recovery. It was an intricate process and seamless solutions. As to us listeners and viewers, it seems so simple and controllable, but I know it's full of drama and motion beyond this solution they made. These are actual business solutions and strategies that they made. Now, in today's webinar, we in the HEIs can now appraise how to go about delivering the competencies needed by the business industries under the new normal. I suggest that you have to again view the first webinar after this to get a better insight the second time around, just like in the movies. The video is better than the slide that participants usually request. Before we start, I would like to invite everybody in a prayer to be followed by the national anthem. Let us put our presence in the Lord. Father God, all glory and blessing, all power and might, all praise and thanksgiving be to you, Abba Father, to us all. We stand on your word declaring that when we call upon you, you will answer us and be with us in distress. Our deliverer and healer, we seek your protection to our families, for our families and all of us, from the scourge of COVID-19 and all manner of disease. and affliction. We pray especially for our health workers who tirelessly perform their duties at great risk to themselves. We pray for all of us co-workers in the business community that we may perform our tasks with greater diligence in these difficult times, to serve each other and our country in solidarity and spirit of social responsibility. We, we pray for all those in authority, in government, and the private sector, that we may have all wisdom and competence and strength to lead and serve through the period of crisis with special attention to our poor and disadvantaged brethren. We're struggling to survive. We pray for reconciliation and peace among all Filipinos as we come to better realize our oneness as people in good times and bad. As a common thread, unite us. So in acknowledge of our dependence on you and in obedience, we approach you, Father God. Humble ourselves and pray. Seek your presence turn from our evil ways, that you may listen from heaven, forgive us our sins, and revive our land. In the loving name of your Son, Jesus, we pray. Amen. May call on FINEX Foundation Chairman and Accra Law of Council, Attorney Eusebio Ebutan, for the opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Bobot. A very pleasant good morning to our invited business educators, to our fellow FINEX members, friends, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the FINEX Research and Development Foundation, Inc., I'm very pleased to welcome all of you to today's Zoom webinar that will deal with the topic, Teaching Business Under the New Norm. As everyone is aware, the COVID-19 pandemic has constrained everybody to adapt and adjust to the new normal, or what others call the new reality. Gone are the days when person-to-person or face-to-face meetings are expected and are commonplace, including at schools and universities. Viable alternatives to the traditional method of imparting knowledge and teaching students must be considered and perhaps even replaced or at least augmented by new innovative means of teaching. The pandemic has brought to fore the primordial concern for the health, safety, and well-being of all, be it the students, the faculty and school administrators, their respective families and friends, and the public in general, all of whom stand to be adversely affected if any one of them or their relations get infected by the deadly virus. I must note, though, that there have been lawsuits filed recently in the United States by students, including those at very prestigious Ivy League universities, seeking to have their tuition and other fees refunded after the schools moved their classes online in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. The students claim that they had been denied the hands-on learning experience that they had paid for. They also claim that online classes do not have equal value to in-person classes. Also, new regulations released on Monday, 6 July 2020 by the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement will no longer allow foreign students attending U.S. colleges that will operate entirely online this fall semester to remain in the United States to do so. Under the new regulations, the State Department will not issue them new visas, and the U.S. Customs and Border Protection will not allow them to enter the country. Such new regulations will affect more than 1 million of the country's higher education students, those who come from overseas. On the other hand, it has been reported that the educational services industry in the Philippines are among the top 10 industries most adversely affected by the government's quarantine measures. Educational services have reported a revenue loss of 76.8% from pre-COVID levels. Incidentally, 4.9 million Filipinos have already lost their jobs, and unemployment is now at an all-time high of 17.7%. There is thus a need to seriously consider the alternative of online classes in the Philippines. We are indeed at the center of very interesting times. I look forward to hearing from our very distinguished panel of speakers who have all been involved in the field of education in very prestigious universities and in many associations of educational institutions for a very substantial number of years. Their experience in the area spans not only the Philippines, but also the Asian region. I am certain that they will provide all of us with some very interesting and thought-provoking insights, views, and suggestions as to how best to cope with the problems brought about by the pandemic, and that they will leave us with advice that will help shape the future of business education in the country. I would like to thank our speakers in advance for their willingness to share their time, expertise, experience, and thoughts with us today. I would also wish to thank the FINEX Foundation's Business Education Committee, in particular, Marivic Españo, its liaison director, DJ De Jesus, its chairperson, Bobot Lambino, who led us at today's invocation, and Caloy Cervantes, who will act as our moderator, as well as our very dependable FINEX Secretariat. Our Business Education Committee and Secretariat collaborated closely in organizing today's webinar. Lastly, thank you very much to all of you for attending and participating in this morning's session. Maraming salamat po sa inyo lahat.
Thank you, Ebot. Now, let's go to the meat of this webinar. I'll be introducing the speakers one by one, and after that, I'll be discussing to you our webinar rules in terms of how to go about it. Again, I'd like to invite everybody to at least look at your chat box and question and answer as the speaker will be speaking. Kindly put your question there. So for our first speaker, Dr. Michael Alba is the president and member of the board of trustees for Far Eastern University from October 2012 to the present, as well as he also is the president in their other FEU group of schools, namely East Asia Computer Center, Far Eastern College Silang, FEU Alabang, FEU High School, Roosevelt College, East Asia Educational Foundation, and Nicanor Reyes Educational Foundation, as well as governor of Nicanor Reyes Memorial Foundation. His affiliation include, among others, FEU Public Policy Center and Industria as chairman. He is also connected with the Association of Southeast Asian Institution of Higher Learning, National Council of the Philippines. He's also the president of Foundation for Information Technology Education and Development, Philippine Economic Society. He's a board member and chair of the research committee of the PACOA, Philippine Association of College and Universities. Member of the steering committee of President's Forum of Southeast and South Asia and Taiwan Universities. A fellow for the Action of Economic Reforms. He's also a member of the Management Association of the Philippines and Leadership Council of Sustainability Development Solution Network Philippines. He obtained his AB Economics degree at Ateneo de Manila University in 78, MA Economics degree in UP Diliman in 87, and his PhD Applied Economics degree from Stanford University. Our next speaker will be Dr. Maria Victoria Caparas. We call her He's a motivated educator with almost 30 years of hands-on teaching and administrative setting in a economic think tank and university. Possesses a strong sense of duty and accountability, intensely focused on stakeholder satisfaction, which drives her to constant professional development. After an early retirement from the University of Asia and Pacific, she's embarking on a new career online education and coaching using YouTube as her primary platform. In her YouTube channel, she speaks on work-life balance, technology, and faith matters. I think you have to check on her YouTube channel, Avic Caparas. She manages her own MB Caparas Management Consultant Services. Dr. Caparas has been a regular speaker since May 2016. She graduated with BSBA, major in accounting degree from University of the East and ranked 20th in the CPA licensure examination. She attained her PhD management degree from University of Navarre, Spain, and MBA degree from University of London, United Kingdom. Our third speaker would be Dr. Arnel Onesimo Uy. He is the current Vice Chancellor for Administration of De La Salle University in Manila. He's a lead assessor in the ASEAN University Network Quality Assurance AUNQA network in the Philippines. In the Philippines, he serves as the chair of the Commission on Higher Education, Chair Technical Committee on Accountancy since 2014. So he's the author of the different accountancy majors, if you will note of, as well as part of the CHED Regional Quality Assurance Team since 2005. He was the main author of this. Aside from his involvement in the AUN, QA, and CHED, he's a full professor of the accountancy department at De La Salle University. He is a certified public accountant from the Philippines and a member of the Institute of Certified Management Accountant based in Australia. He also currently involved as board member of Barrios Corporation Foundation. He used to work with Filipina Shell Corporation and Shell Philippines Exploration BB. So each speaker will have 15 minutes for their presentation. You can again, I would like to reiterate, you can use the Q&A and chat buttons for your questions. This question will be entertained during panel discussion after all the three speakers have presented. The moderator of the panel discussion will be Mr. Carlos Real Caloy Cervantes. He is the Chief Finance Officer and Treasurer, Power Source Group Development Corporation, and also a member of the Business Education Committee. May I now call on Dr. Avic for her presentation.
Is it, should it be me or Dr. Caparas?
Oh, I saw. Sorry. I think I'm reading on the wrong text. I think we have revised it. So I think Dr. Alba will be starting off the presentation, then followed by uh, Dr. Avic. Then the last presenter will be Dr. Uy.
Okay, so good morning. Good morning to all the participants. Thank you to FINEX Research and Development Foundation, and especially its Business Education Committee, for inviting me to be a resource person in this webinar on teaching business under the new norm. I was asked to talk about FEU's plans to adjust to the new norm, and I came up with a presentation in 3 parts. To set the context and backdrop of our discussion, I will first describe the new norm as I see it. Second, I will present how the FE group of schools is planning for the new norm. And third, because I felt that school level planning may not be all that useful to the business professors for whom this webinar is being held, I tucked in a third section on my suggestions to instructors. Okay. So what is the new norm? I think what it really is that it's a short to medium term COVID contemporaneous norm, which will be supplanted by a more enduring post-COVID norm once a vaccine is found. According to an article in this week's issue of The Economist magazine, this COVID contemporaneous norm may end as early as September this year for North America and Europe, and January next year for the rest of the world, if all goes well with the COVID university vaccine, which is the most advanced among the 180 vaccines under development. But while a vaccine is unavailable, we are and will be in a twilight zone period in uncharted territory, so to speak, which will be beset by uncertainty because SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, will be lurking in our midst. Our only defense will remain the public health safety measures to contain the spread of COVID-19, but which inflicts collateral damage in the form of limited economic activity. As for the COVID contemporaneous norm in education, I see that remote learning modes will be prevalent because the conditions of face-to-face instruction are conducive to the spread of the virus. As currently configured, the physical classroom is an enclosed space with poor air circulation, and classes are held over long periods. These features imply that holding in-school face-to-face classes would provide long exposure times to SARS-CoV-2 and deliver a larger viral load. But remote learning modes are prejudged by the public to be a poor approximation of the in-school schooling experience, so discounted fees are expected. Ultimately, schools don't know what the hit will be in terms of drops in enrollment and changes in their cost structure. So school year 2020 to 2021 will be an uncertainty-plagued school year. Given the features of the new norm, in FEU, we quickly realized that we had to reimagine the FEU schooling experience in the setting of a remote learning mode. So the question we posed to ourselves was, how do we continue to offer an immersive, engaging, and transformative schooling experience, but this time in a remote learning modality? But as soon as we asked that question, we realized that we were already well placed to deliver a quality remote learning schooling experience because first, we've had Canvas, the Canvas learning management system for 4 years since 2016. We are one of 7 schools in the country that were the first adopters of Canvas. And I don't know if you know, but Canvas is the learning management system of top-tier schools like Harvard, Yale, and Stanford. Second, on FEU's account, our faculty and students are provided subscriptions to the Office suite of applications, including Microsoft Teams. Third, we've invested quite a bit on EdTech and IT infrastructure in our schools. And fourth, we've extensively trained our faculty on digital literacy since 2016. For many of our faculty members, the training was the equivalent of 1 semester's worth of full teaching deload. In addition, we had the means to explore what would constitute quality remote learning, since we were already gearing up for big data and predictive analytics. So in this coming school year, we simply have to accelerate their development. On this, we will be pursuing 2 things. First, we want to monitor what's going on in Canvas, that is, how remote learning is being conducted. And we will try to answer such questions as, are the teachers uploading learning resources in a timely manner? How are they engaging students in communications, that is, in announcements and discussion boards in Canvas? How are they advancing course narratives or knowledge content? And how are they conducting assessments? And for the students, our question is, who among them are not accessing the materials on Canvas because they may be at-risk students? Second, we have questions for predictive analytics to answer, such as, what are the early signs of student disengagement from studies or stress? What are the early signs of academic floundering? Meaning, these might be students who did all the assignments on Canvas but still did not do well in the exams. As for the shift of delivery itself to remote learning modes, we approached it as experiments by our various schools. And following Mao Zedong's dictum, we're letting 100 flowers bloom. This is also the first principle that we adopted when we opened our senior high school departments in 2016. So as a first pass, we allowed each school group to develop its remote learning modes according to the circumstances of their students. FEU Manila, Makati, and Cavite then came up with 3 remote learning modes, and FEU Tech, Diliman, and Alabang came up with MILES, or mastery-based individualized learning enhancement system, which had 2 flavors, fully online and blended learning. Finally, we're keeping an eye to the future. We are keen to use what we learn in delivering remote learning modes to enhance the schooling experience of students in the post-COVID world. But all that didn't seem to me to be interesting for teachers. So I decided to include some suggestions on how teachers might prepare for and deliver their courses in the coming school year. The first thing that teachers should realize is that remote learning is not simply digitizing your lecture notes, assignments, and exams. For remote learning to be effective, the teacher must work with the learning parameters of the delivery mode. For instance, teachers must understand that when conducting synchronous learning sessions, the duration of the session in minutes should not exceed the age of the students in years. The reason for this is that online meetings are more cognitively taxing because the participants are unable to pick up visual cues of other people's reactions, which they are able to do in face-to-face meetings. Moreover, teachers must realize that synchronous learning sessions are expensive because they require higher bandwidths than asynchronous learning activities. Furthermore, synchronous sessions require more coordination. I'm sure our hosts this morning's in this morning's webinar can attest to this. They had to work hard to remind everybody about the schedule. And we all had to set our schedules today with this webinar in mind. Then synchronous sessions can be frustrating when you don't have a stable internet connection because you get dropped from the meeting or the audio would come out choppy and you'd constantly maybe have to reconnect. Given all these considerations, the takeaway we should all draw is that lectures as the backbone of instruction are no longer feasible in a remote learning mode. In a nutshell, synchronous learning sessions have to be used sparingly, which implies that the faculty must shift their paradigms of their roles in class from the sage on the stage to a guide on the side. This means that they should fully embrace a student-centered pedagogy, and I recommend that they look into active learning and the flipped classroom. In effect, teachers should go back to the drawing board and redesign their courses. And in particular, they should pare down their course learning objectives and intended learning outcomes while providing avenues for students to pursue related areas of interest that there might not be time for in the remote learning mode. They should also develop their course curriculum maps. In assessments, they should not use timed, high-stakes, multiple-choice exams. Education experts say that these types of exams are not meaningful measurements of student learning and are difficult to run with integrity in a remote learning setting. Instead, they should use authentic assessments such as open book tests with generous time limits, real-world projects, reflection questions. They might want to use frequent low-stakes assessments and even consider ungraded assessments. They should also plan for the entire term because in remote learning settings, students don't like surprises. They want everything to be clearly mapped out and well organized from day one. But at the same time, they want to be able to work at their own pace. And perhaps the most important consideration is that professors should pay closer attention to their students and their students' well-being. They can do this by giving their students a voice in how the course is conducted. They should also develop their students' resilience and agency as explicit course outcomes because in a remote learning setting, it is easy for students to feel isolated and disengaged. By the way, student agency is an idea that I want to introduce into the vocabulary and discourse of education in the Philippines because it is something that our students sorely lack. Agency is defined as the capacity and propensity to take purposeful initiative as opposed to feeling helpless. When students have agency, they will not clamor for so many class suspensions even when there is no rain or flooding. Instead, they will own their learning goals rather than just be passive recipients of instruction. And finally, professors should teach with compassion and empathy because we just don't know what our students are going through at this time. But after all that, professors should also mind their well-being. They should set boundaries on when they can be reached and when their students can expect a response to the students' queries. So to conclude, absent a cure or vaccine for COVID-19, the world is and will remain in a twilight zone plagued by uncertainty, fear, illness, and limited economic activity. But as educators, we must persist in our mission by continually reflecting, innovating, and persevering through the challenge of COVID-19. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you, Dr. Alba, for that informative and insightful presentation. We have now a complete checklist on what to do under this new normal. Um, we can innovate to better transform our engagement into fruitful learning. Now, for our next presenter, Dr. Avic, please. So for the next speaker, Dr. Manuel Uy, it will be your turn.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. Coming from
Morning.
two great speakers, it will really be a challenge for me to hold you because I think right now, unless you are more than 60 years old, the lecture time component will be somehow a challenge, right? Can I request now the screen to be unshared so I can share my screen? Okay, thank you. Now, in my particular talk this morning, I was tasked to do something very impossible in 15 minutes. So what I have attempted to do is simply to engage you in a series of conversation. Most of the ideas here are actually shared already by Mike and Avic because they have done a fantastic job at doing this. So I'd just like to begin with something. First, after 121 days of being in lockdown, how do you feel right now? Can you just chat in perhaps in the next 10 seconds, the first word that comes to your mind? 121 days since we were in a quarantine period, and that's actually the time that has elapsed since the time that you have in your classes or to meet with your class and all, right? Can I just have a few words that you have? Yes, very good. How many Netflix movie did you binge watch? What did you learn? What did you realize? Great, wonderful. Now, wonderful, wonderful. I like it when I talk to people, but somehow I have to be convinced that the new mode within which we are communicating is a new reality that I had to face. I never imagined in my life that I will be talking to 300 to 500 in one session, 800 people online, and I will get all of this feedback. In a regular session, if I meet you face to face, chances are you will not even raise your hand when I ask a question. Correct? I mean, that's actually something positive that I need you to now realize because this new situation that we are in offers us silver linings, or if I rephrase that, golden linings that we can really value. So for today, I'd just like to tie up our discussion on business, teaching business in the new norm by asking you and presenting to you some snippets of what we have discussed the last webinar that FINEX did. I was there and wow, when I was viewing all of this, it made me realize, so is this how businesses now are reacting? What do they need as students for them to be able to cope with COVID-19 and prepare all of these plans like instantaneously? How do you present a particular plan in this pandemic when you say care? How does care becomes real? How do you ensure to balance it off with continuity? And as many of you would always argue, especially in FINEX, cash is king. How do you manage cash? Now, I'll flash to you what Jen Pascual showed as well. And if you take a look at this particular list of the strategies that they have formulated, it made me ask a question as an educator. It made me ask, have I prepared my students enough so that they know what to do in case a situation like this happens instantaneously? Take a look at the 11 things that they have to do here. Of course, this is not done by a single person, but in reality, how did I equip the students that we have with such competency, knowledge, skills, even the attitude to say, I'm not gonna panic, I'm gonna have a level head in addressing all of this, and at the end of the day also have a good perspective. Now, I'll talk to you now. How about you who are afraid of COVID-19? Who's not afraid of COVID-19, right? Especially when you are asked this question every time you enter a particular facility, do you have headaches, sore throat, body aches? And if your answer is yes, what do you fear the most? That you will not be allowed entry? Or better yet, that you need to be tested? Now, in order for a business to be able to address this, what are the things that they need to do to allay some of the fears? Of course, nobody here, especially me, I don't want to be tested with COVID-19 swab testing and all. I mean, you saw the video on how they are testing, you saw the false positives and etc. But somehow just this morning, I just like to share with you, I got this particular message from friends. Of course, social media, we are now connected. And this somehow makes me realize that businesses today needs to have some sense of understanding how to address certain things that we may not be able to understand or to teach our classes in a regular format of different subjects. Like this, I highlighted that word. Where in the world would you see a drive-through COVID-19 testing? And it's now upon us. It's real. Who would have thought that for them to be able to address the fears and allow people to test early so that they can actually be cured, a drive-through can be a solution. If it's a drive-through, less fear, at least we manage that fear there. So today, I would just like to backtrack a little because this is not the end thing. This is now the realization of what we are now experiencing as educators. So it begets a question for us to reflect on what do we do, how do we do it, and what are the immediate steps, the stops, and perhaps the directions that we need to take moving forward. COVID-19 is, most of you would actually call it the black swan event. Something that is so catastrophic in effect, but we don't even have probability to describe it because it's so remote, right? Nassim Taleb actually gave us that particular word. And somehow, for me, when I reflect back on the 121 days of being in a lockdown or in a quarantine situation, for me, COVID-19 is simply one thing. And for me, it's simply a catalyst for us to show and to reflect on what is essential, what should be our priority as educators, and what should be the basic things that we will be giving our students or learners at the end of each class. So allow me today to just share with you two things. I will just break down my talk in two parts. The first part is what I have been asked to do, and that is to share perhaps the question, what do we need to do to teach business in this new normal? I think Mike gave us a good list down of the to-do list, and Avic gave us a bird's eye view of what it is to be an online educator and what we need to now possess as faculty or as teachers or as co-learners in this situation, in this new normal. So allow me to just go through my list quickly as part of the things that we have done also in LaSalle and something that I have learned in along the way. First, how do we teach in this new normal? Perhaps the new normal will be defined in the next 12 months or maybe more, depending on the vaccine being found or being able to contain the virus. First, I think educators, be it in a university level or a program level or even in a course level, will need to be more adaptive. They need to understand how to adapt, learn flexible learning systems. That means the design side and the delivery side. LaSalle has not yet finished its last academic year. In fact, we are still in the middle of our last trimester for the last academic year. We started last July 1. And before July 1, since we ended our last term last May, June, all the faculty members were required to revisit and redesign their syllabus so that they will actually be able to deliver a pure online class starting July 1. And that's what we have right now. But somehow, if you take a look at it, yes, the redesign, you have to go back to the basic. Are you just going to go back to your syllabus and say, this is not online, this is online? Or do you have somehow a learning system that will allow you to become more relevant today? Of course, we also, as we now try to reflect this from the entire country's perspective, some of us may not be fortunate enough to have digital connection. So we also need to impute, if you're in the provinces, non-digital technology. Analog can work. That's actually what I wanted to emphasize here. We need to adapt. We need to see what we have around us that we can use in order for us to deliver a design that is appropriate for the business programs that we are entrusted with. And that is actually also going to redefine the place. Right now, I don't know where you are, but somehow, if you take a look at the context of our discussion here, we're from different places, but yet we were able to say yes to this particular webinar simply because of the time element. Place was not an issue. And of course, what do we need to do in terms of learning process and the products of learning that we have? Now, that actually gives me to segue to another thing. Of course, we can take a look at this as just semantics, but somehow I wanted to emphasize this so that we know and take it by heart as educators. One, pedagogy to andragogy, which means gone were the days when we were the center of focus for the learning to happen in any classroom. As Mike Alba actually said, it's not anymore lecture. We're not anymore sage on the stage, but we are guide on the side. We need to embrace that now more than ever. Why? Because we cannot be on the stage all the time. We will not be there doing lectures because we will lose them the moment we say, okay, class, this is the first part of the item, etc. Right? So we need to make sure that we adapt to this and shift our mindset as professors or as educators. We need also to become learners in the process. And as we become learners, we now understand and feel how the learners feel during this particular time. Of course, we heard this. We conducted classroom classes online in LaSalle. For those who enrolled in July 1 classes, all our classes are now done online, as in 100%, which actually makes us understand the need for us to flip the classroom, right? Traditional versus flipped classroom. I mean, we have heard this a lot of times. Good idea, nice to have, but now we're forced to consider this and apply this, right? Because we don't have a choice. Synchronous or asynchronous, we need to balance it off in terms of online. We cannot always be synchronous. Aside from the broadband connection that we need, synchronous is very taxing. It's so difficult. For those of you who know what I mean, how many Zoom meetings do you have in a day? As an administrator, we use Zoom in LaSalle, and somehow Zoom invitation are galore. I mean, you don't have any more excuse not to attend because of traffic or something else, right? And of course, this actually means that we need to redesign again our learning plan, both our teaching and learning strategies, our assessment, to align to a new way of understanding and delivering learning outcomes, right? That's the reason why most of us are actually doing a lot of these things moving forward. And this includes, for example, online learning platforms, considering cloud-based solutions, and somehow doing practicum. But the challenge is, how do we do it online? Let me just give you a segue here. I have this, I forgot. One of the things that I have done in my class is to show them in advance what they will experience in my class. In this particular slide, I am able to show them, for instance, this is my online class. I'm able to show them synchronous and asynchronous. We'll meet here. I'll give you the link, and we will meet 18 hours total for the entire term. And we will actually have asynchronous sessions, 24 hours total. That is to manage their particular time as well. And then the one in lavender are actually going to be how I would suggest that they will invest time in terms of the problem sets that they have online and discussion forums that I have set up online. Now, in LaSalle 2, one of the things that we need to do is to manage the workload both from the professors designing the learning experience and the students. That's why we came up with one particular standard at the beginning before we set to redesign the entire thing by pegging a standard that says 1 lecture hour or 1 unit, 1 hour lecture is equivalent to 2.5 workload. So as a teacher, you know that that's the workload that you can give. And hence, the one in orange. And the total workload with the students who enrolled in a 3-unit class like this would actually be there. So this is just an example of some tools that we have. By the way, I did not invent this overnight. I have been doing this since I have done hybrid classes, but now I had to rethink and balance off the workload of students as well. And that's what I have prepared so that I gave that to them the first time I met them last week. And when they saw that, they know how to balance their workload. They don't have any excuse anymore. But going back here, the challenge for us is how to do all of these things considering our situations right now. I just want to give you one thing. I'm not sure if you know this, but somehow, if you know what this is, can I just ask you to please write in the chat button right now? Who among you knows this symbol? If you don't know, just say, I don't know. That's okay, right? Wow, nice, wonderful, wonderful. So anyone, you don't know? Great, nice, wonderful. For those who said Discord, gamers unite. Anyway, I'm just kidding. But I just wanted to share with you that somehow this particular icon reminds me of how education should be designed on purpose. And that is to be designed as a game so that it's fun. And therefore, I want to take a look at this as one avenue for you. You have Zoom, you have all the other Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams, etc. But I wanted to show you Discord. This is where gamers meet. Just imagine if we can actually use this particular platform to engage students so that they can actually work as together in a somehow a space that they can call their own, that they can talk, and they have a lot of chatbots there. How do I know this? Because the new norm means that I have to work with my children too. They know better about this. So for me to be relevant to this generation of learners, I need to know what they are into, how they do their work, how do they study, so that I can connect and bring them to a different standard. And that's actually what I wanted to share with you with this Discord, right? Fun, right? I mean, a gamer's place now can be used as another platform. Of course, as in any other social media platform, you need to beware because there are lurkers and people who might not use this for its purposes, right? Now, we have a lot of excuses with online. This is just my reflection after conducting classes and meeting. Our internet connections may be slow and sometimes lag, but we gain more time. Remember, no more traffic for us to consider. How many hours a day do you spend in traffic? No need to select clothes and dress up for women to do makeup. No more typhoon signals to disrupt classes, etc. So my point perhaps is this. All of these tools, all of these things that we need to do, consider to optimize the net gain of the time that we were able to sequester back because we are in this situation called the new norm. Because the new norm, while we call it a crisis, John F. Kennedy reminds us that the word crisis in Chinese, where we are closer to in Asia, is 退chi. And 退chi actually means both danger and an opportunity. It's danger because a lot of people are getting sick and are dying because of this. But there's also an opportunity that we can actually do to review, recharge, relearn, rethink, recalibrate, or even reboot. So the last part, perhaps in the next 5 minutes of my talk, will just be for us to reimagine and perhaps reform our context of business education. I have always been a dreamer because the new normal, like this, is actually letting COVID-19 define us. We should be at home. We should actually do this. Our classes cannot be on a face-to-face, so we need to be online, to be hybrid at the most. That's the new normal. But let me challenge you to consider the next normal. And the next normal will allow us to define what COVID-19 highlights and should mean for us as a learner, as an educator, as an administrator perhaps, or even as an individual. Let's not stop with COVID-19 dictating what we should do and what we should do. Because as human beings, by the way, we're called Homo sapiens before, but Noah Harari gave us a new term. We're now called Homo Deus today. Why? Because we can actually take step in trying to use COVID and trying to define what it actually helps us with in our day-to-day context. So let me just spend the remaining time that I have to reimagine perhaps and reform business education in this next normal. I like the word next because it's a level up. New means just accepting what's the reality. But somehow, if you want to be more proactive in trying to now really change, let's reimagine. Let's reform. This may not happen in the next 12 months, but this, I hope, can happen during our lifetime. And that's the reason why, first, I gave you some handles about how to teach business, what you should know, what we can do. I give you some examples and the tips Avic showed you, and of course, the suggestions of Mike. But I'd like to end with dreams, because I think this is very important. When we don't have dreams, we perish as educators, right? With COVID-19, somehow we become fragile because this is actually what we are up to, unless we design systems that will allow us to be resilient in the new normal. But I guess with the Black Swan event, there's now a third consideration, and that is for us to become anti-fragile. And that's the next normal reaction for us. Again, the term anti-fragile is actually care of Nassim Taleb, who also gave us the idea in the concept of a Black Swan event. So let me begin with this. For those who know this, can you type what this scene is? Anyone? In your chat box, please type what this is for, right? Now, okay, good. Wonderful. So you know that the movie is actually on Netflix, right? So if you want to spend time to reflect on certain things that will shake your foundations, maybe this is something that you wanted to do. You might want to do. Watch the movie. It's in Netflix if you're there. Correct, it's Three Idiots. As an educator, this is one of the turning points in my life when I watched this movie, because it made me realize and ask myself, how relevant am I to the one who was entrusted to me to be educated? Because am I really educating them for what purpose, right? So I'd like to end our discussion with the dream. And the dream is, like them, they're bored with lectures, but take a look at the eyes. It's rich with fires that they can see for themselves about what the future will hold. Studies have shown us that a lot of our educational system right now, including business education, always presents disconnected lessons. In fact, if you take a look at this, your students will answer, what's your favorite subject? What subject did you learn a lot from? They will actually do one subject and hate another subject. Why? Do they like calculus? Oh, should it be taught in business? But that's why it's disconnected. All of these are supposed to be connected. Superficial learning, why? Because in the 20th century, we're still using some of this. Our system was actually from rote and repetition. But the 21st century offers us something better. Online gives us the handle to knock off one question. Knowledge, it's all on the net. Everything is there. So what do you do? How do you now synthesize this? How do you process this? So that learning is not anymore in isolation. Of course, we gear up for experiential problem solving or even challenge-based learnings. And we wanted to make sure that we have a flexibility built into students' competency, including collaboration. But the age-old question and gap still exists. Is learning really right now designed to separate theory from practice? Or is learning supposed to be something that will intertwine both? Are we really teaching them to become businessmen or to be part of business in different roles that they have? Or are we just teaching them to comply with all the tick boxes and the number of units that you have to take so that you can have a degree at the end of the day, right? Guys, I just like to pose this question. So I hope that you will also lose sleep like I have to reflect on this. Am I still, as an educator, asking my students to repeat everything that I have? Or am I leading them to a path where they can create and not simply consume what I say? Because creation is building something new. And that's what I wanted to leave with you. Let's revisit what Konosuke Matsushita would tell me. I'm paraphrasing this, and I always share this to my business students so that they understand. The true purpose of business, what we are educating them for, be an accountant, marketer, operations, etc., is really to serve society. First, let's emphasize that in all subjects that we teach. Purpose is to serve society. Question, who is society? Your target market can be your society. But that's precisely what we mean. The purpose has to be clear. Otherwise, we go back into a situation where we can just dictate what we want and push them there. And of course, profit is just a reward for a job well done. Why can't we as business educator dream that we can create a design a curriculum, a particular program where we can teach them nothing but the purpose is to serve society. How do you serve society? Why, what we need to serve society, to know society, etc. And yet, at the end of the day, to teach them how to do their job well. I'd like to end with that, but also my reflection in the last 121 days. The biggest loss in the end of this COVID-19 situation that we have is if we come out on the other side of this unchanged. I hope that this shook us a little, gave us a dream to pursue so that we just don't lay back and just watch things to happen. Let's make things happen. So thank you very much and good morning, everyone. Back to you, Bot.
Yes, wow. That's another amazing presentation, Doc Arnel. Again, that was a comprehensive framework that enabled us to connect the dots from the different contexts topics in business to real world, as Dr. Arnel have shown us. And again, that was really a good story to tell really online. So before anything else, before we proceed to the open forum, I think I have to mention this, that in terms of I think you have to, again, I like to repeat what I earlier mentioned a while ago, that you can still watch the first webinar we held, entitled Understanding How Businesses Are Coping with COVID-19 Impact, at the FINEX Philippine official YouTube. And you can subscribe now. At the same time, for those who are asking for presentation because they were not able to right away connect with this webinar, I think we are providing this live video because slides have no meaning without really the audio, the way Dr. Arnel, Dr. Alba, and Dr. Avic have really presented themselves. So, Kaloy, I think you can now take away for the open
Yes,
forum.
good morning, everyone, and thank you, Bot, for that. We now go on to the question and answer portion, and I'd like to take in from an anonymous attendee who's asked from our educators here, and of course from those actually managing universities. Have you seen the real reduction in enrollees this year, or have you seen any change in where people are now enrolling in the universities or schools that we have in the country right now? Could the professors and the educators respond by in the alphabetical order? Dr. Alba.
Okay. Actually, we're surprisingly doing better than expected. But we also managed expectations. I think there was a lot of fear early on about how remote learning might be conducted and how students would fare. And so to address the concerns, in FEU, we actually conducted a survey to understand the concerns of parents and students. And then we configured our learning modalities to address their concerns. And so the response has been better than expected. We're not going to, I mean, our budget is not really going to take a hit as much as we expected.
I will unmute. Since it is alphabetical order, I suppose, Kaloy, I'm going to answer also. Although I'm not connected anymore with the university, I was told that my program that I used to be the program director, the Bachelor of Science in Accountancy, I left and there were only 3 batches because we're new. The admissions officer just told me this morning, congratulations, your BSA has the 3rd highest applicant this year. The seeds that you have planted are now bearing fruit. So somehow it's something positive, I think, for the university, that still students are enrolling. But I don't exactly know the figures for the entire university.
Thank you, Dr. Caparas. Dr. Roy?
Yeah, for us, when this was actually facing us, we did some number crunchings. We actually had some projections on a potential 50% drop on enrollees, etc. Given the fact that before this, there were a lot of challenges, issues that we face about online learning. Remember the demonstration with CHED, etc. So recognizing that, we're preparing and bracing ourselves for the worst. But we made certain decisions that are very crucial. Number 1, we need to make sure that the timetable is actually something that we can control. Remember, you have not finished our last term. So we need to make sure that we set that regardless. So we had to make certain operational and tactical decisions for this. July 1 was the date. Enrollment will happen June. But we cannot go to campus to do online, etc. So we did everything online. You know, we were just surprised that even if our projections were 50% of the total number of expected students, or we give them certain discounts given that they are also going to adjust to this. The discounts are not meant to belittle or to have a negative connotation to online classes, but simply a way for us to show them that we are adjusting together. So let's adjust. So you can actually adjust your workplace, etc. But you know, starting July 1, I'm happy to say that our enrollment is actually much, much better. In fact, compared to last term, the net effect for the undergrad were even higher than last term. Why? Because we did certain things too. We actually admitted freshmen early. That's why there's a new cohort of freshmen who are joining us in the third term, not in the first term. Now, but even without the freshmen, our numbers are actually very, we're surprised, but pleasantly surprised too. However, this is the challenge that we gave our faculty and the community. This is a test case, which actually means that our performance and how we are able to deliver will actually speak a lot about what they will do next term. That's the reason why we actually had a lot of edtech sessions, online certificate, badges, etc. And somehow that's something that surprised us. That second, the students that we are now working with are actually more comfortable perhaps in this online session or online classes. So I don't know, maybe that's a generation that we need to learn and get to know more.
Thank you, Dr. Roy. I will now ask each doctor, educator, again in alphabetical order, and then I will revert to our MC as we have very little time left. For Dr. Alba, my question is, does the school or your university check or validate or control the content that your educator provide your audience or your students?
Yes and no. So recently, we've actually before the pandemic hit, we already were on an initiative to do curriculum maps. This was required anyway by AUNQA. We wanted to be, to undergo certification by the ASEAN University Network Quality Assurance System. And they required curriculum maps. So we were already planning, we were already doing the thing anyway, which meant that we had to understand what the distinction of FEU education would be. We had to do backward design, which meant looking at what is the ideal attributes of what are the ideal attributes of FEU graduates in each course. And so that, and given those list of attributes, we then had to locate where the foundations were going to be laid, how the skills and competencies were going to be developed in the course of their program. So we were in that anyway. Then now, because we're really in remote learning, we're organizing everything in Canvas. Even our the analog learning, the records will be on Canvas. And it's actually an initiative under my office to harvest the data. The nice thing about Canvas is all the transactions on Canvas are captured. So you can harvest the data. So we're going into big data, data analytics, predictive analytics anyway. So we're now in the effort of harnessing the data, harvesting the data, and then analyzing. Where our teachers actually, doing the learning objectives as defined by the curriculum map. So we will look into these. But at the same time, there is academic freedom. So how they actually want to, implement the course within those broad general objectives, they have the freedom to do.
Thank you, Dr. Alba. This is for Dr. Avic Caparas. What do you think is the most effective teaching or educator application to be used by educators out there? You mentioned Zoom, Meets. Are there any more applications you can recommend? You're on mute, Dr. Caparas. We still can't hear you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. I cannot say a most effective strategy because it really depends also on the demographics and the particular topic. So there are many things that are in play. So I think we are on an experimental mode. They can try some games, some polls, some questions. It's really to see the audience. Are they listening? And I think it's very important that at the beginning of the class, is really to engage on informal chats. Really ask them, have they eaten? Have they, like, because it's very important to have some sympathy, some empathy. So I think that's very important, and I think that can really add to some effectiveness. But some engaging games for the students, like for me, starting with Kahoots. I mean, the students start dancing already. So we have free some free apps for that. No, so I wouldn't really say the most effective strategy.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Caparas. This is for Dr. Uy. And the last question for now, before I give it to Mr. Lambino. The question is, will your school allow cross-topic enrollments and crediting from other schools, or is it still limited to your partner institutions and maybe expand some more?
Are we referring to senior high school to college or our college to college?
Well, we'd like to see all those platforms,
okay.
Dr. Uy.
Yeah.
What would you do?
Okay, good. Starting this particular term, we have decided to embark on certain things. Number one, we have opened up the university for all other students in other universities who may want to enroll in our courses online. So we have already a platform where enrollment happened end of June for them to enroll in any of our subject. And if they enroll, we can actually give them a grade to their university so that they can be credited. We're anticipating this is one way of also reaching out to universities who may not be able to open up or offer these courses in their own locality. Since our assumption is that we may have some slack capacity in some of these classes, then we will actually invite all the others who may want to and who are qualified, depending on the endorsement, to be able to join us. So the answer to that question is we have opened this up to that program, and that's already one of the things that we're now doing. Now, for other schools, I think for senior high school, that's a different situation because the context there is, of course, what subjects have they taken up that will allow them to move? I think that's something that's also not just institutional, but also on a national level. For example, if I am actually under the Hume's track, can I enroll in accountancy or business because I'm not in the ABM track? Now, of course, DepEd said that any graduate of senior high school is qualified to take any course. SHED said there's no prerequisite on that because supposedly our courses are supposed to be addressing all the need because senior high school competencies are done. So that's where we are in terms of the policy. But what we have done is this. For those who want to join LaSalle, for example, next year, we're offering certain what we call fundamental courses to strengthen them up and perhaps beef their competency wherever you are to enroll. And then that becomes now your pathway to college. So we have done certain flexibility in addressing that so that at least we are now able to serve the society by adapting or accepting more students to join us. By the way, our online classes are not just online classes. We wanted to label it to say that it's actually faculty facilitated classes that will actually separate us and distinguish us from Coursera and all the other online MOOCs and classes that you have. So it's faculty facilitated. So that's one of the things that we're offering as a unique value proposition that we have to.
Thank you, Dr. Uy, Dr. Caparas, and Dr. Alba. I will now turn this over to Mr. Lambino. Mr. Lambino, could you? Thank you.
Wow. Yeah, thank you, Kaloy. Wow, that's an amazing interaction among the three doctors. Now we will be proceeding to the closing. We'll call on Mama Ribik, who is our license director and president for the FINEX Academy.
Thank you, Bobot. Indeed, as pointed out earlier by our FINEX Foundation chair, Attorney Ebot Tan, this change, what's happening right now to us is really motivating everyone to adopt the new environment, to the next environment. And when we talk about education, we look at the role of the schools, the learning institutions, the role of professors, the students, as well as the parents, and how we're going to support the learning moving forward. although when I was listening to the three speakers, I felt like they are really so engaged. Their energy level are really so high, and I truly admire them for being in this particular vocation. I'd like to call it vocation because it is really a sacrifice to be a teacher, and I'd like to say that to all our participants. We admire you, and we hope that you would continue and you would be able to adapt to this next norm. Now, some of the things that I picked up, like Dr. Alba said earlier, there are so many things that we have to adjust, but teachers must learn or must assess what is happening to them as a as an educator, as an individual. And I think it's important because as we go through this process, professors, educators are learning. You're adapting to this environment, and you must understand how you can, better adjust to it, how you can learn from it. The point raised by Dr. Avic, earlier on about establishing connection, I think would help. Connecting with other educators, learning from what they're doing is really going to support you in this journey. And finally, I found Arnel's question at the end of his presentation quite really interesting. What are we teaching to our students? I think students at this point need to see that the end objective is not really to be able to answer the exam questions perfectly, but to be able to use what they're learning in their future advocacies, in their future careers. And therefore, I'm really hoping that in addition to the academic topics, the theories that we are teaching them, we would be able to help them also mold their mindset, because only by doing that can we help them own their own learning objectives, as pointed out by Dr. Alba. Okay, so I hope on behalf of FINEX Foundation, I wish our participants in this morning's webinar the best in their continuing learning journey as educators. And I hope that you would be able to make a significant difference in the mindset of our students. So thank you everyone for attending, and I hope you will continue to follow us in our succeeding webinars. If you have any suggested topics, just type them on in the chat box and the committee will consider them. Thank you and goodbye, everyone.
Okay, so I'm still live. Okay, so thank you very much for all the attendees and participants. I hope you find this worthwhile. And for the next seminar, see you. So goodbye.